Hi folks, this is Abel James, and thank you so very much for listening to Fat Burning Man, where we talk about real food and real results. I'm coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee this week, where we're hanging out in the woods. Actually, I'm taking a quick respite from nature to record a few shows here today. We're at an Airbnb place that's in the Art District, which is kind of cool. But pretty soon it'll be back to the woods to work on some new blog posts and videos for you guys. So along those lines, I'm really excited to say we just released the Wild Diet cooking class, which is a 16-part cooking series that shows you how to cook quick and easy meals for you and your family in 15 minutes or less. So my wife Allison and I set up GoPros and cameras all around our kitchen to show you how exactly we cook at home, and I hope you like it. So if you'd like to check it out, please visit fatburningman.com. And as always, the best way to keep in touch is to go to fatburningman.com, enter your email address, and make sure you never miss another show. And you'll also get a few free gifts and recipes for signing up. So check that out. You can also find me on Twitter at fatburnman. So let me know what you think about the show. Leave some funny hashtag or something on there. And Facebook as Fat Burning Man or Abel James. So I love hearing what you guys think of the shows. So keep in touch. In the meantime, here is the review of the week. This one's for the podcast. It's 5 stars from Beach Bum Mommy 4. Amazing and life-changing, she says. I absolutely cannot say enough about the Fat Burning Man podcasts. I've always considered myself health conscious, but more in the ways of conventional wisdom until I turned an amazing corner about a year ago when I stumbled on other people who spoke about healthy fats, proteins, non-GMO, eating organic, etc. I love Abel's genuine approach to helping others learn. He sought out a wealth of information, knowledge, and amazing people he interviews on these podcasts are truly life-changing. The content of these podcasts is more than just info. It is life-changing and life-sustaining knowledge towards optimal health. So thank you so much for that, Beach Bum Mommy 4. That's a really great name, by the way. So along those lines, on this show, one of the things I wanted to do is show that being healthy and happy at the same time is not only possible, but pretty much the only way you can do it for the rest of your life. You have to enjoy this. And so I, more than just having a show about this or writing books about it, literally this is what we do every day. We think about this stuff all the time. It's a part of our lifestyle. And I want to show other people like you guys, the awesome listeners out there in internet land, that it really is simpler than most people make it out to be. And that's why I interview, over 150 shows now, people, everything from like backwoods survival to how to start a farm to the best exercises you can do. There are little bits of information from all of those pieces, but mostly it's about knowing that this is simple. It's about real food and old-fashioned exercises like functional movement, lifting stones around, running outside, really cool stuff. A lot more fun than the miserable environment that most people talk about if you want to be healthy. You don't need to abuse yourself to lose a few pounds or to get in the best shape of your life. So let me know what you think of the show by leaving a review on iTunes as well. I read every one of them. Now on to today's show with Mr. John Moody. I had the pleasure of hosting a panel at Paleo FX with John, and it was on sustainability. Very fascinating man with a really cool history. So listen to this. Imagine a life filled with allergies, ulcers, and otherwise ill health. Then imagine finding out that all of that could be healed through real food. This was John's life a bit over a decade ago, riddled with disease in his early 20s, healed and sent on a journey into real food, sustainable farming, and the forces that seek to deny us both. John is an administrative for the Whole Life Buying Club in Louisville, Kentucky, one of the largest local food buying clubs in the nation, and also the interim executive director of the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, and his family seeks to tend well their 35-acre farmstead in Kentucky. On this show with John, you'll learn how to make your own fermented ketchup at home, how to eat free wild edibles from your backyard, why some of the healthiest food is illegal in most states, and much more. All right, let's go hang out with John. Hi, folks. I'm very excited to be here today with Mr. John Moody, who is a farmer, author, activist, and interim director of the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. How's it going, John?
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just very, very well today. Thank you very much. Let's start with when you weren't doing so well. Like a lot of the people who I've had on this show have come from a place next to death almost, kind of like dragging their sorry selves along with some sort of sickness or other that may have come from something related to the diet or the environment. Your story is particularly interesting, and it's led you to a really cool path. So why don't we get started with your struggles?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a typical American family, eating the typical American diet: breakfast cereals, canned sodas, potato chips, fried foods, whole nine yards. And, grew up with allergies, grew up with dental cavities. I was not a healthy young man, but I thought I was healthy like most Americans, because normal in America is defined by you get sick quite often, you need to go to the doctor. But when I hit my early 20s, my body really began to break down on me. And my allergies became incredibly severe. And I even started to develop duodenal ulcers, which are basically like holes, bare holes in your intestinal tract, where the stomach acid and other things are just lapping up against these bare raw holes in your body.
Yeah.
And so I went to a doctor. And even though I was in my early 20s, the doctor was just like, hey, no big deal. We'll just put you on this medicine. And I asked him, I go, hey, what's this medicine going to do to me?
Right.
And it was almost comical, where he pulls out the insert for this medicine and he flips it open and it begins to fold and it rolls like all the way down to the floor and across the floor. And it's like this real tiny print. And he's like struggling to see, what is this? He's like, well, he said, looks like this medicine shuts off your body's ability to produce hydrochloric acid. And at first I'm like, I've discovered my superpower. Like, I produce hydrochloric acid. Like, I can burn holes in concrete and cement. And then my second response was like, I was like, doctor, I was like, if my body produces hydrochloric acid, isn't that important? Like, do we really want to be shutting off my body's ability to produce hydrochloric acid if that's what my body's made to do? And he had no good answer for me. He was just dumbstruck by the question itself. Like, the whole idea that we should try and understand how the body works and bring it back to full functioning rather than merely treat symptoms of when it gets into a state of dysbiosis. It was just foreign to his approach to medicine.
Yeah.
And so I walked away with the prescription because I really didn't have a choice at the time, because I was in just such bad shape. But within 6 months, through changing our diet, both where we bought food and how we prepared food, I was able to completely heal my duodenal ulcers. I had seasonal allergies so bad that Benadryl was sending me free stock options. And I had no more seasonal allergies. My brother and my sister are both asthmatic.
Yeah.
And they just can't believe it, that I have literally no allergies whatsoever.
Right.
And I live in the Ohio River Valley on a 35-acre permaculture farm.
Sure.
It's just like ceaseless pollen. I haven't had a dental cavity in probably 13 or 14 years.
Wow.
And so that just like propelled she was my fiance at the time. She's now my wonderful wife, because she makes really big mistakes, I guess.
Oh, come on.
And so like it just propelled us into an unexpected journey. Into food and into farming and to helping people with real food, and then trying to protect people's access to real food and small farmers so that they can be healthy as well.
Right. Yeah, so that's where it gets interesting, because a lot of us, including myself, have heard from doctors, it has nothing to do with diet, or you can't heal yourself with diet. What did you do exactly to do precisely that, to heal yourself with real food?
Yeah, well, we were recommended to a set of cookbooks by a lady by the name of Sue Gregg. And so paleo people will not be familiar with Sue Gregg, because her cookbooks were like all grain. But they were whole food, real vegetables, whole grains. And when we were reading Sue Gregg, she had a little place on her website where she said, because she was an older lady at this time, even then she was already older, probably in her 60s or so. And she goes, you need to look at all the information in my books through the lens of the work of the Weston A. Price Foundation. So then I got myself a copy of Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon.
Great book.
And Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston A. Price. And I mean, those books were just eye-openers on so many different levels. And so, we went from eating processed white bread to where we'd make our own sourdough breads.
Cool.
And we'd go from eating Walmart chicken, and I guess it was really probably Sam's Club. We did the gateway drug where we started shopping at like Wild Oats and Whole Paycheck.
Sure.
And then from those two places, we did the CSA, the mystery box of vegetables that you get every week. And so it was just it was a process for us that took many years in total, though thankfully things we did at the beginning resulted in substantial health benefits, like bone stock. Going from cooking your meats, frying or grilling, to cooking them under low temperature for longer periods of time and drinking all the liquid that produces, and cooking not just the muscle meat of animals, but taking advantage of the bones and the collagen and the ligaments, eating the whole beast rather than just the muscle meat. Those were some of the very first things we did, because at the time, my wife and I were incredibly poor. We got married, and within like 8 weeks, I think my wife was pregnant roughly.
Wow.
And I was still in school finishing up a master's. And so like we didn't have a whole lot of money, but we felt very strongly we wanted to pay people fairly for the food we were eating, and we wanted to eat well. And so you can't afford to eat filet mignon. You end up getting the cuts of meat that are actually so much better for you and more nutritious. It's kind of the strange dichotomy there. So
yeah, it's a beautiful thing though when you can go to a farmer's market and spend, like we usually spend like 1/2 or 1/3 of what a lot of other people are spending on meat, just because we're going for those cuts that are way less It's really just supply and demand. It's like a popularity contest amongst meats. It has nothing to do with how good they are for you. So you were able to turn your health around by basically going back to the way we used to eat, it sounds like. Because those books that you mentioned, they're great books, but they're not new. It's not like cutting edge stuff.
Oh, no, it's really the way my grandmother cooked before she was PR campaigned into feeling guilty for eating the way that resulted in her and my grandfather and their grandparents living to be 70, 80, 90 years old. That's what really stands out to me, is like my grandfather smoked every day. He was like 6'8", and I mean he was like perfectly healthy into his 70s. Like even though he smoked, and he was eating bacon and eggs just about every single morning. And that was his mom and dad. Like they were incredibly healthy until their 70s, until their 80s. And somehow they convinced my grandma and all these other people that they're killing themselves, even though they're the only ones healthy around, and their kids look terrible.
How does that happen? Because I've seen it happen. I've witnessed it. I've even experienced it. What is that disconnect? When there are people in a group who basically might have things just fine, or their health is kind of in line, but because everything around them is not, they kind of get pulled into that herd mentality of, here, eat this poison. Well, this is a broader topic that I always encourage people to look into, but the cultural effect of World War II on how we arranged ourselves as a society. In some ways, the food system we got is part and parcel of the transformative effect of that war. Interesting.
Another great example is like diamonds. Diamonds are inherently worthless almost. So like,
especially the pretty ones, the ones you can put into a blade, you can use those, but
And so other than like industrial uses because of their hardness. So like before World War II, there was no diamond ring industry whole thing. And there's a number of great articles that show that like, when did guys think the only way you can get married is by putting yourself in $10,000 of debt
right.
to show your affection for a girl. It was all marketing. It was all PR post World War II. And why did so many people smoke post World War II? Well, the cigarette companies gave the troops free cigarettes, not merely to support the war effort, but because you see the development of early advertising and their understanding of how peer pressure from behavior and other things. And when they got the soldiers hooked on these things, diamond rings, all this other stuff, when they infiltrated housewives with, sophisticated housewives, they don't cook from scratch. They cook Betty Crocker.
Right.
Because who doesn't want to be sophisticated? Who doesn't want to be modern? And
even though Betty Crocker was invented by a marketing team.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the worst part, so the war and other factors just made the average American ripe for the corporate picking. And because they also controlled the government dietary guidelines at that time. Denise Minger, who I'm sure you've heard of.
Yeah, she's been on the show.
Her book, Death by Food Pyramid. It's another must read.
Yeah.
She shows that, what you have is corporations running the dietary guidelines coming out of the government. So the advertisers are getting people from both sides. What all they're hearing culturally is you should eat this way. And the hen house is being not just guarded by the foxes, but the hen house is now a foxhole.
Yeah.
And the hen house is giving all bad information. And there's very few people who had the sense to see that they are being played on basically a national scale between the two.
Now, one of the things that you've done or that you do now is protect the rights of the consumer to eat real foods that come from local sources, which is very much a challenge these days. Like most of the milk that I drink when I choose to drink it is illegal. And that's very bizarre, right?
Yeah, moonshine.
Right, moonshine milk. Firstly, if you walk into Sam's Club or whatever today, why is the food that's there? Okay. And then we can go.
Yeah. So the first thing to realize is when you spend $1 at a place like Sam's Club, Walmart, McDonald's, farmers on average get 20 cents or less of your dollar.
Wow.
So the USDA releases what they call the food dollar breakdown every few years, where they show where $1 of consumer spending goes in the food system. Farmers don't get any of it. So you have to wonder, why do farmers sell into a system that's so bad for them? Well, most of your listeners are probably familiar with Upton Sinclair's work of fiction, because it actually wasn't very factual, his work of fiction, The Jungle. And so Upton Sinclair and others kicked off, again, right around the time of the Second World War and this Cultural Revolution, they kicked off and inaugurated a radical expansion of government involvement in our dinner plates. So you have a guy by the name of Earl Butz. I think he also comes up in Denise's book. Really interesting character. And he, I believe, was the head of the USDA. And he traveled the country telling farmers that they either were to get big, meaning go industrial,
right,
or get out of farming. This was government policy under this guy. And then you have government food safety regulations. Food stupidity regulations is a better way of thinking about it, that further punished anyone who didn't go into that system.
Yeah.
So, why could you not get eggs from my farm at a local grocery store? Well, one is I could never produce enough eggs to stock a grocery store even for 3 hours. Two, to sell to that grocery store, I would have to have $2 million in product liability insurance. I'd have to have a $250,000 egg washing machine. So everything about selling food in that model excludes small-scale farmers who care for their animals, care for their land, and really care about making a high-quality product. It's the whole deck is just stacked against real farmers feeding people through those avenues of food distribution.
Right. My brother has works on an organic farm in upstate New York, and right now they're dealing with some issues that are going on there with regulation and triple washing, or looking into investing in a machine that basically does a process that they would deem unnecessary, and certainly to a small CSA unnecessary, as compared to the produce that you find in a traditional grocery store, which is maybe it's triple washed or whatever, but it's also covered in pesticides and waxes and God knows what. So what do we do about that? Like, where we stand is unsettling for anyone who knows about how to eat right? Because it's basically, the system is preventing us from eating the foods that are most nutritious. What do we do about that?
Well, there's a number of things people can do. One is like you. We started a buying club to make it even easier than shopping at a farmer's market. But at least in most places, you still have food choice. It may not be convenient, but there's very few places now in any more urban areas in the nation that you cannot shop at a farmer's market as opposed to a Kroger or a Sam's Club or something else. So anybody can choose small farmers over pseudo food providers. One reason I ended up involved with Farm to Consumer is because of our work changing that balance of power. So just this past year, we supported one of our members, Frank Wallace, in Wyoming, and Wyoming passed a food freedom law. You would think we're the land of the free, home of the brave. I always like to joke we're the land of the fee, home of the slave. Because, I can't even choose what toilet I poop in.
Right.
Like, I am forced by law in Kentucky to put in a septic system, which we know doesn't work.
Yeah.
Whereas if I wanted to poop into a composting toilet, I would go to jail.
Right.
Like, I would be a criminal for disposing of my waste in an environmentally and economically sensible way.
Right.
And so,
which is almost a testament to how poisonous we've become, right? Because that would be the argument against it.
Well, it's just, fecal disposal and handling is a whole nother show that's worthwhile.
It is.
So in our modern toilet systems, where we take our potable water and fill that, and water, which is the perfect medium for spreading disease and pathogens, and we put waste into it. Yeah, brilliant, utterly brilliant we are as a nation. We're the best in the world. And so Farm to Consumer, we've been working hard with our members. So we're a membership organization. We have members in all 50 states. Encourage your listeners, you should consider becoming a member, supporting our work. Because we helped get the Wyoming Food Freedom Law passed. Similar bills are moving forward in Maine currently, and possibly in Virginia. And this bill is great, because you would think in a free country, because you can go do this in China. You can go do this in North Korea. But you can't do this in America. I can't sell my neighbor a chicken pot pie that I made in my kitchen in America, a supposedly free nation, which you can do basically in every other stinking country in the world. Well, you can now do that again for most foods in Wyoming.
That's awesome.
You can go to a neighbor, and just between you and the neighbor, you can buy, sell, trade, and barter food with no government bureaucrat sniffing the plates and soiling everything with their gumminess. Well, it's just crazy that the things our grandparents would have taken for granted, the ability for neighbors and communities to feed themselves, are now illegal.
Yeah.
That a farmer like Vernon Hirschberger in Wisconsin would face a trial that cost the state of Wisconsin multiple millions of taxpayer dollars. He's an Amish farmer, 11 kids. He doesn't have as much as a parking ticket. And he is facing more legal action from the state of Wisconsin than a serial rapist. Or take Mark Baker, a farmer in Michigan. I don't know if you heard about his case.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources overnight made it illegal for farmers to raise pigs on pasture in their state. Not even a vote of the legislator.
Right.
So Mark overnight became a criminal facing almost $1 million in fines from an unelected bureaucratic agency who's colluding with the Michigan Pork Producing Council to get rid of their only competition.
Yeah.
And so we litigated his case. We defended him in court. And so that's the kind of stuff we're doing. We're protecting the small farmers, and we're protecting people's rights to access food, and we're pushing back at the legislative level to get laws passed that recognize that we as people have an inherent fundamental right to choose what we eat and who we get it from.
Yeah.
And you might say, oh, that's common sense. We sued the FDA a number of years ago over the interstate ban on the sale and shipment of raw milk. Mm-hmm. And in their response to our lawsuit, the FDA had the gall to say that there is no tradition and no fundamental inherent right to choose the foods you eat. That is what the FDA said. About 2 years later, in a court case in Wisconsin, and you see how dangerous this is.
Sure.
We laugh, but this is really how these people think.
It's preposterous, yeah.
A judge in Wisconsin echoed their exact language in his ruling, and even went farther and said, you don't even have the right to drink the milk from your own cow.
Jeez.
And so for your listeners, it is really no joke that these people think that you should be denied the ability to choose what you eat and who you get it from. Mm-hmm. This is how they function, and this is what they're pushing for.
Suffice it to say, one of the points that I like to bring up is that basically what this implies, it's not a doomsday scenario. You can still eat well and do things the right way. But if you follow the herd mentality to do whatever everyone else does, this is what you're up against. And this is why eating foods in schools, in government buildings, and corporate offices, almost everywhere.
Hospitals.
Yeah, and hospitals, absolutely, are not the best foods for you, and can lead to a lot of problems that otherwise would be prevented or healed by eating real food the whole time. That's full of enzymes and nutrient density, all the things that Weston A. Price and nourishing traditions would inform you about, and a lot of things we talk about all the time. But let me ask you this: what is it like to run or to have your own farm? What are you growing? What are you eating? What does your life look like?
So having a farm there's a scene in the first Jurassic Park movie where I think it's Samuel Jackson plays the one African-American scientist.
Yep.
And the crazy scientist guy, the chaos theory guy, is like, well, don't you have a lot of problems here? And Samuel Jackson's like, he's like having all the problems of a major theme park coupled with all the problems of a zoo.
Yeah.
That's a lot like having a farm. It's just,
without the dinosaurs.
Yeah, I don't know. We have coyotes, possums, raccoons. We have our fair share of critters of all different shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
Having a farm on one hand is great, because one reason I got into farming was for the buying club I run. In order to evaluate farming methodologies, mm-hmm. I needed to have my hands in the soil. I needed to understand better what goes into producing truly high quality nutrient dense foods. Mm-hmm. And we're in Kentucky, which is not the mecca of organic agriculture.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of farmers in our area who were not going to be willing to try new methodologies unless they could see that they actually worked.
Okay.
So our farm is not a normal farm.
Yeah.
Because I do things on my farm. Yeah. I do things on my farm to push the limits and try and solve problems mm-hmm. that sustainable systems are facing.
Yeah.
So like with our chickens, the average farmer is feeding their chickens about 1/3 a pound of grain per day. Mm-hmm. Because chickens are omnivores. It's not bad for a chicken to eat grain, mm-hmm. but most of them are feeding about 1/3 a pound per day. And grain, non-genetically modified, high-quality grain is incredibly expensive.
Right.
you'll pay for good quality chicken feed 3 to 4 times as much per pound as for crap chicken feed.
Yeah.
And this is why when you go to a farmer's market, it pays to know what kind of chicken feed that farmer's using.
Right.
Because there's lots of farmers who want $5 a dozen for their eggs, and they're feeding their chickens the same thing the Kroger chickens are getting.
Right.
Is that really worth $5 merely because it comes from a small farmer who's feeding them the same genetically modified, chemically laden animal feeds?
Right.
So we're like, hey, like chickens survived for thousands of years without being fed feed from bags of grain. So we got our chickens down now to about 1/8 of a pound per chicken per day from 1/3 a pound. So so that's roughly an almost 2/3 decline in how much food we're feeding them. Because I've been experimenting with composting areas and debris fields and wild edibles and perennial plants planted everywhere to create kind of a self-sustaining forage system that the chickens drop fertilizer. The fertilizer grows these plants that the chickens then eat.
Wow.
So it's doing stuff like that. What we eat, another big thing that's nice about having a farm is we love foraging for food.
Yeah.
Like I did a talk at Paleo FX on this subject, just pointing out like the best organic lettuce in a grocery store will have a fraction of the nutritional value of dandelion greens, which are free and growing wild, of lamb's quarter, which just pops up in my garden by the hundreds.
Yeah.
So, there's all this free wild food available on a farm. And it's great because like for my kids here in a few more weeks, they won't be allowed snacks in the house anymore. We'll just say, well, if you want something to eat, go find it.
Yeah.
And it's great because like they don't think of food as something you find in a grocery store.
Yeah.
They think of food as something you find in a perennial polyculture landscape.
How cool.
So they recognize, my kids probably know 40 or 50 wild edibles. They know more than I do.
Wow.
So they know Queen Anne's lace, which is a relative of carrot, and they know lamb's quarter, and they know where all the wild berry patches are on the farm.
Cool.
And we know to do tick checks real heavily this time of year because of that. So on the one hand, we eat hamburgers. They're just from grass-fed beef that's cut 50-50 with ground up grass-fed heart.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Organ meat burgers.
Yeah, exactly. So we, or we'll eat a chicken. We'll have a roast chicken, but the bones, instead of going into a trash bag, will go into the crock pot.
Right.
And then when they come out of the crock pot, they go to the compost pile. So on one hand, our diet, and we eat potato chips, but they're Honest chips from Megan Reamer's Honest Chip Company, where it's a potato chip cooked in a traditional oil from a truly organic potato, where you can eat that potato chip and feel well when you're done, not poisoned.
Right.
So on one hand, we look fairly normal in terms of our meals are structured a little bit differently. Where like the ketchup we eat is a fermented ketchup.
Cool.
It's not it's not a pasteurized, commoditized, plastic bottled high fructose corn syrup ketchup.
Yeah.
It's a ketchup we make right here in our kitchen using tomato paste and other simple ingredients.
What else do you use? I'm curious. So how do you make that? Because we made it a few times and it's pretty simple.
Yeah. We use, organic tomato paste that comes in glass jars. We'll use garlic or fermented garlic flowers. Garlic flowers are just the scapes of garlic that we chop up. We'll pack them in jars with some salt and some water to cover, and they ferment and make fermented garlic flowers. They're delicious.
Cool.
And so we'll use garlic or garlic flowers. We'll use raw honey as a sweetener. Hey, beautiful daughter, is there anything else in our ketchup? And then we might add a little bit of spices, like a little bit of cayenne pepper or something. It all depends on what kind of ketchup you're looking for.
Yeah.
But it's super simple to make.
Right on.
And then you let it sit out in a warm place for about 3 days.
Uh-huh.
Oh, and we use apple cider vinegar, true raw apple cider vinegar, such as Eden Organics. There's a couple raw apple cider vinegars because that's the inoculant for the fermentation.
Right on.
So, yeah.
What else do you make? Any other condiments or?
Oh, we make kombucha.
Yeah.
We'll make ginger carrots on occasion. So, we make fermented oatmeal. We make pickles. We make sauerkraut. So, we have 4 small kids at this point. And because I speak at conferences and because of work and stuff, we found for some things, it's just easier for us to pay a local person or barter or trade and make it than make it, because it's just too much for my poor wife, especially when I'm on the road. And so, so we go through seasons of making more or making less.
Sure. But that's the way it used to be, right? Like if you look back to our grandparents, or maybe a little bit farther than that, it didn't used to be that the house was a place of production where we'd all produce everything. It was more of like a bartering system where someone made the best pie and someone else made the best bread, and you could swap things out for a wheel of cheese. We don't really live in that world right now, but I think it'd be pretty cool to start to bring that back, which is what you guys are doing. So we're just about out of time. But what's one thing that you'd like to leave some people with? Maybe a course of action that could help build a world for your kids that we can all be proud of.
Yeah, well, again, the 2 big things I tell people is, 1, I'd encourage them to become a member of Farm to Consumer.
I would too.
I'm the executive director. Joel Salatin, Rob Wolf, tons of people support our organization because we're working to restore these basic rights so that you can eat well, more efficiently and affordably and accessibly.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I would say is, every meal is a chance you get to vote.
Yeah.
And you're voting, every meal is an opportunity you get to actively shape what kind of world we're going to have a year, 2 years, 5 years from now. So make good decisions with every meal.
Awesome.
Because it seems like such a small thing, but it really has a major impact.
It does. It does. Well, John Moody, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you?
Well, Farm to Consumer has a website. It's farmtoconsumer.org. I'm on Facebook. I just have a personal Facebook account. I probably need to set up a public Facebook account. I know a bunch of people at PaleoFX are like, why don't you have a public Facebook? So I'll go do that. So hopefully I'll have a public Facebook account soon.
Nice.
And then people can find me there as well. So because they probably don't want clogged up with pictures of my beautiful wife and cute kids all the time on my Facebook.
Maybe they do. That's what Facebook is for, I think.
It is.
John, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hey, this is Abel James from Fat Burning Man, and if you liked this video today, please take a quick second to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Now, I have a quick question for you. Do you want to learn how to get fit and lose fat by exercising less? Get the step-by-step strategies for how to do that right now for free. All you have to do is subscribe to this channel right now, then click the link below to fatburningman.com. Enter your best email to sign up for my newsletter, and I'll send you a quick start guide to burning fat right now and some ridiculously good recipes as a special thanks. Once again, just go to fatburningman.com right now and enter your best email to get your free fat burning download straight to your inbox. Talk to you soon. But this keeps it nice and warm.
Another product,
and it's about the same price as those glass ones. So I broke enough of those
why so many
to
of
go
the
for this one.
low-carb
It's lasted a long
are holding on to pounds they don't want. I felt this when I lost my first 50.